wonderful. Again, thank you all for being here and participating. I am here with Alabama Extension, and my counterpart Hunter couldn't make it today, but I'd like to introduce our wonderful speaker. This is Wizzie Brown, from an IPM Program Specialist from Texas A&M Agrilife Extension. And today she's going to be talking about drain flies, house flies, and fungus gnats. And she's going to give you some tips and tricks on how to identify them and also how to control them. Just remember, if you've got questions, put them in the chat box. We'll try to get those answered quickly. And at the end, we may have some time to ask Wizzie some questions from the chat box. And also a reminder, we are recording this. So if you miss parts or you have someone who wants to hear it, these will be recorded. But without further ado, Wizzie, you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I appreciate it. Okay, so I don't have to tell you what I'm going to talk about because we have already done that. So let's move on. Okay, there we go. Wrong one. Okay, so we're going to start off with drain flies, and these are my personal favorites. They're also called moth flies, and these are very cute in my opinion. Fuzzy little flies, a lot of people will mistake them for moths, which is how they get the name moth fly, but they will get the name drain fly because a lot of times that is where they will be coming from. So if you look at the pictures on the left, you can see that they do have very hairy bodies. They also have scales and hairs coming off of their wings. And when they are at rest, they will typically fold those wings back over their abdomen. And I should probably take a step back. And since we are covering flies today, flies are a little bit different of an order of insects because they only have one pair of wings, so 2 wings total, and the last or the second pair of wings are going to be reduced, and they are what we are calling halteres, and they actually will use those as a gyroscope to kind of help themselves fly around. So all of the insects that we're going to be talking about today in the adult stage are only going to have 2 wings instead of the normal 4 that you would see with other adult insects. So 2 wings on these adults. They do have those hairy body and wings, and they look like tiny moths. These often will be found resting on the wall or ceilings when you have infestations. And if you disturb them, they don't usually fly really long distances. They will just kind of flutter over not too far away from their original spot. The larvae usually aren't seen, but you can see one there on the bottom. And they do require moisture to survive, and a lot of times they will live in the slime layer of drains, which I know sounds disgusting. But if you think about stuff that can build up on the inside of drains, that will create a slime layer, and it provides organic matter. So the adults will go down, lay their eggs in that slime layer. When the eggs hatch, the larvae will actually live in that slime layer, and they'll eat that organic matter that is built up. So kind of cool if you think about it in a way of bugs, because they are eating that slime layer for us. But you can see that the larvae are worm-like. They do have a little tube that comes off the tip of their abdomen, and they do have a head capsule. So when we're looking for sources of drain and moth flies, it's going to be a common theme for this presentation, because a lot of these we need to find where they're coming from so we can figure out what we need to control. So sources for these: the slime layer of drains is a common one. And this could be any sort of drain that you're talking about. You see in the pictures there is a floor drain, which is really nasty. We also have a kitchen sink drain there, and that one is actually hooked up to a garbage disposal, which can lead to even more organic matter buildup. And with that, it can also be shower drains, toilet bowls that aren't used very often because the water drains out of those pipes, and it can allow flies and stuff to get through there. They can also be in drain pans underneath of refrigerators or freezers. If you have organic matter built up in there from dust or hair or just whatever debris, if your house is like mine, I have pets and organic matter is everywhere. If that gets wet, then that can be a source for these as well. So locating the source, if you're trying to find if they're coming out of a drain and what drain they're coming out of, you can either do what you see in the bottom photo there. You can place tape over half of the drain overnight, and then you can check it in the morning to see if the flies are emerging from that. The other idea is to use a clear plastic cup that is coated with either petroleum jelly or an oil of some sort. And you can put that over the drain and check that in the morning for flies. And that could be used as a method if you have other flies coming out of your drain, because there are other flies that could also be in the drain that are not necessarily drain or moth flies. So this is one that can also be coming out of drains. This one is known as a phorid or a humpbacked fly. And other names that it goes by is a scuttle fly, which comes from the way that it kind of walks around. These don't fly a lot. They will more so be walking around on surfaces, kind of scuttling about, which is where that name comes from. The humpbacked, I think, is pretty much apparent by that top photo there. They do have a large hump thorax, which is the second section of the body. And they are also sometimes called coffin flies because these are known to come and infest cadavers. So in olden times, they would often be found in bodies that were not embalmed properly, and hence the name coffin flies. So again, two wings, these are flies. They have that really humped thorax, and then, as I said, they tend to run around rather than fly. Larvae here are going to be a carrot-shaped larvae, and it's going to be usually in some moist organic source. So sources here. These are going to be things like rotting potatoes or onions or other sorts of bulbs or tubers that you may have. I remember when I was in college one time, I had a massive phorid fly problem in my apartment. And I know that's horrible that an entomologist would have a big problem, but I discovered a bag of potatoes that I had forgotten even existed. And they were to the point of liquefying. And they were in a drawer, and when I opened the drawer, phorid flies came out everywhere. And once I got rid of the potatoes, the flies went away, which was fantastic, but the smell was absolutely disgusting. Some other sources that we can get these flies are things like septic lines or septic tanks that need to be cleaned out. They can also lead to people discovering that they have a broken sewer line somewhere, and if that's the case, then you would need to call in a plumber to fix that so you would not have the flies emerging out and being able to access those areas anymore. In the top right picture there, you can see a dead rat, and these will attack dead animals or carcasses or cadavers. I also have a recycling area and a garbage area. So a lot of times there will be organic matter that is moist in those type of areas that have either been from the trash itself, or it could be like dripping out of the recyclables. If people are not rinsing those before they stick them in there, then that can lead to sources as well. So locating the source for these, a lot of times you can consult a professional, whether that is a plumber, if in the case of a sewage or septic system, or a pest control professional sometimes is going to be needed to call in to help locate the source. A lot of times I find with phorid flies, if you follow your nose, then you can often discover where these are located, because usually they're going to be associated with stinky, rotting things. And if you have a decent knows that you can smell things like that, then you can figure out where it's coming from. Fruit flies. These are another small fly that we'll find in the house. Again, 2 wings. A lot of times these will have red eyes. They're kind of a brownish color, and then their wings are going to be folded over each other, over their back when they are at rest. The larvae here are going to be a creamy white color, and they are going to be carrot shaped, and they're going to be very, very small. So sources for fruit flies are going to be overripe fruits and vegetables. A lot of times you will find these in grocery stores or farmers markets or homes. In the case of the top left picture, that is actually occurring at my house right now. I just got that picture yesterday. So I'm going to be making banana bread this weekend with those bananas so I can not have fruit flies start accumulating there. These can also come from drains or garbage disposals. If your garbage disposal is not grinding things up properly and rinsing them all down into the drain, or if you throw that random lemon slice down there because you think it makes it smell better, when you grind it up, it may not grind that whole thing down. So you can get fruit flies going in and out of the drain to access things like that. Again, trash and recycling containers like we talked about with the forward flies. And then the other interesting thing is that you can find these a lot of times around mops, rags, or sponges. If they're kind of moist and they have some debris on there, then they can be hovering around those areas as well. So locating the source with these, you really want to look for areas with some sort of moist fermenting material. And the bottom left pictures, I do want to point those out. Those are traps. The orange one is going to be a ready-made fruit fly trap, and it has a vinegar smell to it. So you can make your own fruit fly trap, which is basically what I did on the left-hand side. That is apple cider vinegar, and then you just roll a piece of paper up into a cone shape, tape it shut, put it in some sort of a cup, and then you would pour a little bit of that vinegar at the bottom. What happens is that the fruit flies are going to be attracted to that. They're going to crawl down through that funnel and get trapped down in there and eventually drown in that vinegar. So it's a good way to not only monitor what flies you have, but you can also kill some of the adults. But even if you're killing the adults when you have fly problems, until you find where they're coming from and get rid of the source of the larvae and where they're living their lives, then you would really need to continue killing that. The source is the most important part. Once you get rid of that, your fly problem is going to go away. Fungus gnats are another one that we will commonly get indoors, especially if people have lots of house plants. I know here in our office, we typically get fungus gnat problems around Christmas time, and that is because a lot of people buy the poinsettias for their various office staff, and those will be sitting in offices and people will water them every day. A lot of times those plants don't need to be watered every day, and so that can cause fungus gnat problems. So again, 2 wings for fungus gnats. They are going to be dark in color, and they're going to have very, very long legs. The larvae here are typically going to be found in the growing medium, and they will feed on algae, fungi, and plant roots inside of the top layers of that soil. And they're going to be translucent, and they have a dark head capsule, as you can see in that bottom photo. So houseplants are going to be the huge thing here that you need to look for. And like I said, the poinsettias at Christmas is usually when we have the outbreaks here in the office. And usually it is because people are overwatering. It is very important to look around those houseplants for the fungus gnats flying around, or if you don't want to stand there and look for the gnats. You can use a yellow sticky card. Let me go back. So that middle picture there is actually a fungus gnat that has been trapped on a yellow sticky card. And you can either buy those sticky cards or you could make your own with yellow paper and spray adhesive. And then you would just stick that on a popsicle stick or something and stick it in the soil of the plant, and then the fungus gnats can get caught on there. So you always want to check the moisture level of the soil before watering some more. Houseflies, 2 wings. These are going to be a gray fly, and then they will have 4 black stripes on their thorax. So the thorax is the second section of the insect's body, so right behind the head. And you can see on that photo on the left there, you can see those stripes on the thorax there. I think everybody's pretty familiar with what a housefly looks like. You're probably also familiar with the larvae. Larvae for flies are commonly called maggots, and they all pretty much look the same. I mean, there are some slight differences, but a lot of times when we're dealing with maggots, we have to rear them out to tell what they actually belong to. So these are going to be tapered or a carrot shape. They're going to be creamy white in color. They are legless, and they kind of scooch along to actually move, and they don't have a defined head. And this is another photo that I just took yesterday. My neighbors threw out a bunch of stuff, and there were plenty of maggots in the garbage. Sources here are going to be fecal material. We also have carcasses, garbage. Again, we're looking for that organic matter that the flies are going to lay eggs in, and that is what the maggots are going to be feeding on. So it's very important to look for that moist, decaying source of food for those maggots. So this one wasn't on the title slide, but I wanted to include it because these are often mistaken for houseflies. So here we have flesh and blowflies. And the top left photo is a flesh fly. These often get mistaken for houseflies. They look very similar because they are gray, they have stripes on their thorax. But if you look at that one closely, the abdomen of it has a red tip on it, and the housefly isn't going to have that. And then the blowflies, they again look very similar to a housefly, but they are going to be some sort of a metallic color and have a metallic sheen to their body. So larvae, again, the maggots look just like the housefly maggots. You really can't tell them apart here. So carrot-shaped or a tapered body, creamy white in color, they are legless, and they have no defined head capsule. So flesh and blowflies can be in pretty much same areas as houseflies, so you'll definitely want to check things like fecal material, carcasses, garbage, but these can also be in areas like sewage. So along with the forward flies, they can be in those sewer areas. They can also be in grass clippings that are moist or poorly managed compost. If your compost isn't taken care of properly, then it can lead to fly problems. So you do have to be careful about that occurring. So when we are looking at flies, the call that I normally get from people is, I have gnats flying around in my kitchen. And from there, that doesn't give me a lot of information because I can't really tell them where to look other than go find some moist organic matter and see if that's where they're coming from. So what we need to do is we need help identifying what those are. And so if you want to identify that and you feel confident to do that yourself, then you can either capture the animal itself, you can collect droppings or whatever it's leaving behind. You can also take pictures and send them to people like myself and others. You can actually submit photos for identification and ask questions on control on the e-extension site. So we are here to help you. When you are taking digital photos of things, please try to take a clear photo because it's really difficult to identify things when they are not in focus. And another helpful thing is to put something in the photo for size reference. That way we know how big it is that you're looking at the insect specimen. And a ruler is fantastic if you can do that, but a lot of people don't have a ruler handy on them while they're looking for bug problems. So a coin is probably my next best thing because pennies are pretty much always going to be the same size. Hands as a size reference does not help because I don't know how big your hand is. Paper clips can be difficult because there are different sizes of paper clips. So I recommend coins, or if you can, a ruler. That way we get that size reference. And then a clear photo. Also try to take multiple pictures. That way we have a selection, because a lot of times we have to look at different characters to figure out what it may be. So when we are talking about pests and pest problems, we are looking at what they are going after in our homes. And if you think about it, this kind of makes sense, because insects are going to require pretty much the same things that we need to survive. And if you think about that, that is food, water, and a place to live, or harborage. And what we are trying to do is break this pest triangle by getting rid of one or more of those things. And if you are able to get rid of food or water or harborage, then that will either cause the insect to go to a new location that has those things that it needs to survive, or if it's unable to do that, then it will end up dying. So think about that. I always tell people that they need to think like a bug. So figure out what food are these insects eating, or where are they getting water, or where are they living. And once you can do that, then you can figure out where the source can be, and you can take care of those problems. All right, so management. I broke these into inside flies and outside flies. And usually the inside flies are going to be pretty much all of them, because all of them can get inside. But outside, a lot of times it's going to be mostly housefly problems, or the blowfly, flush flies. Sometimes we'll have fungus gnat problems if people are watering their flower beds too much. We can get those out there as well. And then around garbage cans, depending on what you're throwing away and what it looks like, you can have all sorts of stuff. So when we're talking about inside flies, drains can be an important thing. And being able to clean those drains is going to be very important. So what you're trying to do is get rid of the organic matter that is built up on the side of that drain. And you're going to need a stiff brush, a stiff bristled brush that you can fit down into the drain. And you would need to scrub that as far down as you can. And then you would want to flush that, so that you see the scrubbing in the top photo there. And then right below that, you see the tea kettle. And that would be flushing the drain after you scrub it. And you're going to do that with boiling water. And that's going to get all of that organic matter down. So while this is possible in some cases, like the kitchen sink there, you can see it's very easy to scrub that drain and then flush it with the water. But there are floor drains sometimes that you cannot get a brush down in there to physically clean it out, because it's screwed down, or they sometimes even grouted it down, and so it is permanently in place. In those cases, if you have something like that, there are pesticides that you can treat that with. There are some sprays, but there are also things like you see to the left of the tea kettle that are biologicals, and those basically will be put into the drain area, and it will eat away the slime layer. So it will cause the area that the flies are eating on to go away, and so that's a way of cleaning it without that thick brush. So if you can, do the brush and the boiling water, but if the drain is in place and you can't get the lid off, then you can use some sort of treatment chemical like that. So if we're talking about fruit flies, we need to talk about how we ripen our fruit. So if you are, best scenario, if you're going to bring home fruit and vegetables, it's really best to stick those into the refrigerator to keep them from being overripe and attracting flies. And I know that's not the greatest choice. Things like tomatoes really don't do well once you put them in the refrigerator. Some people say that they taste differently once you do that. If you are one of those people and that's not something that you want to do, you can do what you see on the bottom right there, and you can stick those things into a paper bag and then put a clip on that. That way the flies can't access it and it can ripen in that bag situation. All right, so the top left photo is a rat that has died in the house. And this is going to be an example of when people have lots and lots of either flesh flies or blowflies emerging in their house. And I have had this call multiple times where people say, I have all these flies, they seem to be coming out of the wall, there are maggots falling out of the electrical socket, what do I do? They need to open that up and get whatever dead animal is in there out of the wall void, and then once that happens, the flies will go away because they're coming out of that carcass and they're helping to break it down, so they're doing a good thing. It's just not the greatest having them emerge into the house. You can use fly lights in the house, and this is my house here. I have fly lights in my house by the front and back doors, and they are little tiny ones that you will plug in. There's a glue board behind that light, so the light is going to be attractive to those insects, and then when they come in close, they get stuck on that glue board that is behind it, and then when it just gets filled up, you can change out the glue board. And then to deter the fungus gnat problem, you want to check the moisture level of your plants before you water them. So stick your finger down in the soil, make sure that it is actually dried out before you will actually water that plant again. A lot of people get on a watering schedule of plants where I water it every day or I water it every other day. And sometimes that's not needed. It really depends on the plant and the soil and what kind of pot you have it in, all sorts of things. So always check the soil before you water and make sure that it actually needs that water added. More inside flies. This is the garbage can slide. So this goes for garbage and recycling areas, or garbage bins and recycling bins. So try to use bins that have lids on them. And then you also want to use liners. Liners are going to make it easier to clean, and it doesn't allow that kind of funk to build up. And somehow, as you can see on that bottom picture, even when you do use a liner, if a bag has a hole in it or something, things can leak out. So you need to occasionally check the inside of those bins to see if they need to be cleaned out, and kind of do that on a somewhat regular basis. You want to take your garbage out regularly, and more so in the warmer times of the year, because that can speed up the development time that it takes from an egg to reach the adult stage, and so the life cycle can really speed up. The other thing that you see there is me throwing away a plant, and that is disposing of infested items. And you know, while you don't necessarily have to throw away the plant if you have a fungus gnat problem, you just need to stop watering. That was what I had when I took the photo. A better idea would be like the bananas that I have at home. Instead of throwing them away, I'm going to make banana bread, but if you get something that is rotting, you definitely need to dispose of it somehow, whether that is taking it into the compost pile or putting it in the garbage can, or actually making something delicious out of it like banana bread. Inside flies, again, we have spills that you're cleaning up, some of these flies are going to land on those to see if those spills are going to have anything that they require. Along with that goes mopping the floors regularly. I have a child and he isn't the cleanest, so there are spills on occasion, and so he has to clean those up immediately. We have taught him, you know, if you spill something, it's perfectly fine, but you need to clean it up, because when he was little, it was one of those, oh, mom and dad will get it, and now he needs to do that himself. But we have talked to him about why that needs to get cleaned up, so you're not attracting those insects to that sticky organic matter. Fixing broken tiles. This can be important because if you have a loose tile, organic matter can build up, that dirt and debris can build up underneath that tile, and then if it gets moisture under there, that can lead to fly problems. So if you have a broken tile, a cracked tile, a loose tile, make sure that that gets repaired. And then a good old fly swatter is fantastic for killing a lot of these flies. I am kind of crazy when it comes to having things like house flies in my kitchen, and I will stalk them with the fly swatter until they are gone because they just make me nuts. Fortunately, I have dogs who also join in the hunt, and they like to hunt the flies as well, but they typically will eat them when they find them. I just kill them. But fly swatters or newspapers or magazines or whatever you can to smack those flies and kill them can help to control the adults. All right, management for the outside. So fly traps are a possibility, and you see there in the top left a fly strip. That is a sticky paper that you hang up. You do not want to put that right by the back door because it's basically going to have all those flies right by the back door. So put those away from the house. There are also other types of traps that you can use for flies. When you are doing that, you want to make sure that you're putting them away from where you're eating or hanging out or where you go into the house. Picking up animal waste is another huge important one, especially when it's really hot like it is now. I typically will pick up the animal waste twice a week in the summer times, and that is me doing my duty outside, pun intended. And you just need to make sure that you're getting rid of that, because that can draw all sorts of flies, house flies, blowflies, flush flies. They will all attack that and lay eggs, which of course the maggots are going to break it down, but I would rather just get it out of there so I don't have those fly populations building up. So while those are dogs, there are other people I know, especially in the area that I am in, that have a bunch of like chickens or other sorts of birds in their backyard. On the bottom left there, you see a quail pen, and that has fecal material as well. So lots of flies there, and they have a water container, so the organic matter gets moist and it's going to build up. So that needs to be also taken care of a couple times a week. So you can put that in a compost pile, make sure that you turn it under, or you can throw it away in the garbage, whatever your choice is. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you do need to manage your compost properly. If it is too wet, that situation can get really gross, and lots of organic matter breaking down that's wet can lead to flies. So make sure that you are turning it properly and that you are switching things and layering things like you should. Garbage cans for outside flies. Try to use garbage cans with lids and recycling cans. A lot of people, you're not going to use liners in your outside bins typically, so you would want to clean these on a regular basis. And you could just, you know, use the garden hose, use a scrub brush if you can. A lot of times I just use the jet stream on the garden hose, squirt some detergent in there, and I hose it down really well and get all of that stuff out of there. Garbage cans on the middle picture there, you need to keep your garbage cans away from your doors because the garbage is going to attract flies, and if you put them right by the doors, that is going to lead those flies inside the house. So try to put them around the side or inside the garage where the flies can't go, or different things like that. If you have infested garbage bins, you can spot treat for flies. That is a possibility, but you would only want to treat that area. You don't have to treat everything, just the bin that is infested. And you would want to make sure that you are choosing the proper product for that that is labeled for that particular area. And make sure that you're also wearing your proper personal protective equipment. So the hanging bag of water is always brought up when we talk about flies. So here's our hanging bag of water. It even has a penny in it here. And that is a big no. A lot of people swear that it works. And if it works for you, or you think that it works for you, then that is perfectly fine. Feel free to hang them up, but they have not been proven scientifically to actually reduce fly populations in the area. So I would personally skip the hanging bag of water with the penny and purchase an actual fly trap that will lure those flies in with a pheromone or a chemical smell, and then they will get into that trap and they'll end up drowning. So again, if you're using a fly trap, put it away from where you're hanging out. So the other thing about outside flies is we need to make sure that they are not coming in the house. And to do that, we need to first check for a good seal around our doors and windows. So the door you see in the upper left there, you can see daylight around that door while the door is closed. So that signals that there is not a good seal and that insects can get into the house in some manner. So you would need to replace the weather stripping, which is what you see in that middle picture. Sometimes you need to also check the threshold of the door, which is what you see on the bottom left there, and get that replaced. And then on the right is another thing that always needs to be checked. Make sure that your screens are in good repair. If you have holes in your screen, then the insects are going to be able to find those holes and get into the area. So that is all I have. If you have questions on this, you can either track me down on the extension.org site, because I do answer questions on there, or you can contact me directly with any of those things that you see on the slide there. And then here is our next thing. I am going to turn it over to Taylor.
Thank you, Wizzie. That was wonderful. All kinds of great information. I know I will be using those tips. Join us next time for, we will be having a native pollinators talk. If you have any questions, y'all can comment in the chat box. I've been looking, and it looks like most of the questions we got answered early on. But if you have any questions, you can use Wizzie's contact information or post it in the chat box. Please remember there's a survey that it's going to pop up on your screen. If you could take that for us, we would greatly appreciate it. Any questions? Anybody? No? No? Okay. Well, Danny, you got anything you need to say?
No, if there's no questions, we will see you next month. Thank you, Wizzie, and thank you, Taylor. That was awesome.
Thank you, Wizzie. That was wonderful.
It is. I have to go home and clean my kitchen from top to bottom now.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, everybody.